All right, welcome to another episode of the LogiCast. My name is BlankaKong, and today we'll be doing something a little different. It's just a two-man group today. It's just myself and Gunner Eos.
Hello.
And today we'll be doing a Resident Evil tier list, just a general tier list on all of the Resident Evil games. Um, I haven't played every single game on this list. I've played about 90% of them. So games that I don't or have not played, I'll either put it in the tier that I kind of feel it lands in based on what I know about it. And if not, then Gunner will just kind of unanimously pick its fate. So that's kind of how we'll do it. I don't know if you've played everything on this list.
No, I haven't played everything, especially the more obscure, like the super spin-offs. But thanks to the power of YouTube, I've seen gameplay and I've seen other people review some of the more obscure games, so I have second-hand knowledge, I guess. So
Okay. So we'll go based on, I guess, release order. So I think that makes the most sense.
I think so. Yeah.
And we'll kind of go from there. So, first up on this list is the original Resident Evil. I think this it started everything.
Yeah.
Without this game, the others simply would not exist. But it is not an S tier.
No,
I don't think it's A. I would put it in B.
I could agree with B. I never played the original. I only ever played the remake, which we'll get to. I've heard. Yeah, I've never played the original. I don't know where I was. Probably I was playing Final Fantasy when this game came out. I never played the original. I played the remake, but I've seen the voice lines, and oh my god, I know it was a different time. Voice acting wasn't this prestigious career it is now, but whew, those lines were fucking rough, man.
Yeah, so for
Jill
me,
sandwich.
yeah. So like I did play it when it first came out. I didn't beat it until much later, right? It came out in 95, I believe. 95 and 96. And
I was probably playing Final Fantasy 9. Yeah, that's why.
So I did play it. I borrowed it from a friend, and it scared the shit out of me. But the reason why I put it in B tier is because it hasn't aged well, and I think it still deserves a high ranking because it was the first game, and it's not a bad game by no means. It's just it has aged poorly, and so that's
a good description.
Yeah, I think it deserves to be knocked down a few pegs, especially considering what Resident Evil has evolved into. Given today's how many games there are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna put it in. I think B tier is fair. I figured I'd explain it a little bit for those kind of raging at me.
Yeah, okay, I mean, because this is like this is the OG.
Yeah,
so
it's the OG. But let's be honest, it's not. It's still playable. I think it's still very playable today. It's not polished, right? It's a game from 25 years ago.
I think you perfectly, you described it when it says compared to everything here, it has not aged well. It hasn't. You play it for nostalgia or just like, what was the first Resident Evil game like? Right. That's kind of what you're playing it for.
Exactly. So that being said, Resident Evil 2, I think, deserves to be A tier. Because I think Resident Evil 2 is a way stronger game as a whole compared to Resident Evil Original. This has 2 campaigns. It has actually 4 campaigns technically. Because you have 2 characters and there's an A and a B scenario.
Yep.
There is the I think this game had it. I remember the time trial mode. We have to survive. You unlock.
I believe
Tofu.
so.
So this and it just as a game, like as far as the quality goes, it's not perfect because it still has the cheesy lines or whatever, and you can say what you will about the PS1 graphics, but I mean it is what it is. That's the machine it was on. I think as a game, just from a design perspective, a pacing perspective, I think 2 is probably one of the best Resident Evil games amongst them all. So I think it deserves an A tier at the very least.
I agree. Like at the time, it was like it blew my mind. I remember I couldn't play this game when I was young. I remember I borrowed it from an aunt's boyfriend, and I was playing it on his PlayStation. and I could only get through the cutscene. Once the opening cutscene finished and I got control of Leon, I turned it off because it was too much for me. But when I finally, grew some chest hair and played it, I was like, this game is really well done, especially for its time. Like you said, there's 2 different campaigns, 2 different main characters who have 2 different kind of like story focuses. One has Sherry, Claire's with Sherry, and Leon's with Ada, and you get to play as Ada and Sherry for a small part of the game. And so it was like, technically you play as 4 characters if you want to kind of break it down like that.
Sure.
And then the fact that when you play on B, they added Mr. X, which is like, who the fuck are you? You weren't in my A playthrough. So they added like a new boss type enemy. It was like, that was pretty big for the time that it came out. And the voice acting, while cheesy in certain situations, definitely was a marked improvement from the OG Resident Evil, 110%. Like, I think, that Resident Evil 2 is an A for sure.
Yeah, Resident Evil 2 is, I think it still holds up today. It's still playable today. And it's pacing, like, let's say if you've never played Resident Evil 2, let's say if today you're 25 and you've never played Resident Evil 2, and you go back and you play it for the first time, I think it could still get you.
Yeah.
It could still scare you. It could still make you like, oh, it could still make you feel like a feeling of dread, which I think is impressive. So, coming from a PS1 game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Next up is Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Got to make that distinction very clear. This is the PS1 version of RE3. While I think RE3 isn't as good as RE2 from a game design, this is my favorite Resident Evil. I just want to make sure I say that. So my bias is out there. I love this game. I played this the most. It is not an S tier. I don't want to necessarily put it in B because I think there's more to it than there is in the first one. And I think Nemesis pulls a lot of the weight in this game. I'm tempted to either put it in high B or low A because I think 2 is better. This is where my heart wants to put it. Low A tier.
Okay. First disagreement of the night. Okay. I think it's probably a C.
Really? A C?
Yeah, like Resident Evil 3 was a good game.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come off the back of RE2 that had 2 playable characters with 2 different sets of weapons, and like I just made the statement, technically 4 playable characters, and then shrink it down to 1 playable character with an ever omnipresent boss and the severe lack of different bosses compared to 1 and 2. It was essentially Nemesis in his multiple stages and a worm. That was the only bosses in the game. Also, 3 was light on puzzles.
And puzzles.
Light on horror and puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
I did like the quick time, like, I guess, precursor to quick time events. I forgot what they were, the actual acronym for it.
Oh my god.
It's been a minute.
Well, in Resident Evil 3, it was different. It was like a decision you had to make, right?
Yeah. So I guess like a split-second decision. Correct us, put in the comments the actual name because they gave it some cool name to make it sound cool. But back to the point, it's just like there was just less puzzles, less bosses, less characters. Which I'm not saying you have to fill your Resident Evil game with a ton of characters. But when you come off of 2, it does affect its ranking, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. 2 is a better game, even though 3 is my personal favorite. But you do get to play with Carlos. That's technically a second character.
You're right. I stand corrected.
They did have other bosses like Mikhail's helicopter. It's kind of you had the worm, but I guess it was pretty much Nemesis,
and it was very action focused. I mean,
it was.
Granted, my words are going to probably come back to bite me when we get to action focused Resident Evil. But since we're doing this in terms of release order, I'm trying to judge my classifications based on if I was way back in the 90s and this was just showing up in Toys R Us or like Blockbuster or something. That's how I'm trying to, me personally.
I can see your point. C feels low to me because I'm already seeing other games I would put in C that I think this game is better than. I can concede and put it behind part 1 in low B.
All right, we'll do that. Yeah. I can. I'll agree
even though
to
this
that.
breaks my heart, but that's okay. I like you made some good points. It does lack bosses. I didn't think of that. That's true.
Well, minor spoiler alert for my future prediction. There is another game closely related to this that goes a lot lower, but we'll get there.
True. Yeah.
We'll get there in due time.
Yeah. So, but yeah, RE3 original, it did lack bosses. It did lack the horror factor as far as like, I don't know, like atmosphere. I think it had a scary atmosphere.
I did like 3.
You felt really powerful because Jill had an arsenal. She was strong, man.
Yeah, I mean, she had the dodge, which was brand new for any Resident Evil at the time.
True.
The fact that you could completely avoid damage. Now we go like, I could parry shit with my knife. But back then, it was just like, whoa, she can not get hit? Crazy.
Yeah, that was insane.
Mm-hmm. And it was like one of the first, I don't know about OG, but it was one of the first ones I remember where you had like an automatic weapon. You had an assault rifle.
If you played on easy mode, yeah, you got an assault rifle, which is insane. But like also, even without that, even if you played on hard, you know, she's still like, cause it was the first game. I'm pretty sure it was the first game that you were able to make ammo. Like you got gunpowder, you had the gunpowder maker, so you know, like you never really ran out of bullets, especially if you were conservative type.
Yeah, compared to the mansion of 1 or like the police department of 2, ammo there felt like very sparse, and you had to make decisions of do I enter this battle or do I avoid it? 3 was like, well, I could just make me more handgun bullets. So yeah, we're gonna kill these zombies. Let's go. Oh, there's an exploding barrel. Cool. I get to see some pyrotechnics now.
True.
So
yeah. They were definitely like, yeah, I could see that. So even though I loved 3 because it was the first one that you were outside, like you weren't confined to a place. You weren't
that I do remember. Yes.
Police station. You weren't inside of a mansion. You were outside. So like that was like super cool to me. You know, I don't know. I think 3 is fantastic. It is. I would say it's the weakest. I can agree that it's designed from a design standpoint. It is the weakest amongst the original 3. Even though it is my favorite, but yeah, I can concede a low B. I can give that up.
All right, I can live with that.
Alright, so PS1 era, we still have Resident Evil Survive. I played this game once and I fucking hated it. I'm tempted to put it in F, quite frankly.
I'll let you go first. Yeah,
I'm done. It was bad.
Okay,
it was just bad.
These are one of the ones that I personally didn't play, but I did see playthroughs and kind of like other content creators break down the game, and this shit is hot garbage. Like the story, I'm not saying Resident Evil storylines are Academy Award winners. They're not.
No.
But even by Resident Evil standards, this was just bad. Like is this the one with like Ark? Yeah, this is fucking Ark Thompson. And I'm like, who is this guy? Why should I care? Why are we now in some random Umbrella facility? And then all of a sudden, like they want to put some like weird shoehorned relation that, oh, somehow this is my best friend, Leon Scott Kennedy, sent me on this zombie infested island to do stuff. And it's like, wow, that's like Marvel levels of fucking connections. So I was like, I don't get it. I mean, this is a spin-off. And some of these spin-offs, in my opinion, are pretty decent. This was not one of them. No. I think it's right where it needs to be.
Yeah, it's an F-tier game. It was the first time Resident Evil went first person, and they did not execute, in my opinion.
Oh, okay. So let me make a correction. That was not the one with Ark Thompson, but this one it's still appropriate. But I'm confusing games. So let me just correct myself on that one.
No, all fair. Listen, I didn't correct you because I didn't remember because I didn't give a shit. I was just like, this one sucked. This one's just not fun. It is not good.
Look, first-person Resident Evils, we'll get there. In my opinion, they worked. They exist now, and they work great. Just not when this came out.
Yeah, not in this generation. So yeah, Survivor. And I know there's probably going to be a Survivor fan out there who's like, Really,
The
you know,
one?
it's got to be in like a C tier. Nah, dog. Like, I mean, maybe I'll go back and play it someday, but when I did play it, I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. So it's an F for me, and I'm not getting any
No,
pushback on
no,
this, so that's
no.
where it stays. And then Survivor 2, which was Japan only,
Oh,
I didn't play because it was Japan only, and it was Resident Evil Survivor, so it was two reasons for me not to play.
well,
So I'm gonna put it right next to Survivor and
I'm
F tier.
I'm fine with that because yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, I guess none of us knew there was a sequel.
So sorry. And then so we also have this is technically not release order, but because we're still talking about the first games, Resident Evil Deadly Silence on the DS. I did play this.
Okay.
It's not great, but it's still Resident Evil. But it is on the DS. So
I think it. I think it deserves to be C simply because
C,
it's just a lesser version of the game.
yeah,
I commend them for trying. I can't give them. I can't take points away from trying. But if I had to choose the OG to the DS one, I'd
I'm
personally
playing the
probably go to
OG
the OG.
for
Yeah,
sure, for sure.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm gonna put Ninja Gaiden, sorry, Resident
Ooh,
Evil Gaiden right next to it because this was on the Game Boy Color.
I
Um,
remember this one. Yeah.
and this was like either like a sub scenario to two or like a really condensed version of two. I don't remember. I did
Um,
play it once, but I didn't
I
finish it.
believe. Again, comment section. Correct if wrong. I believe this one is kind of after two, and this one has Leon and Barry. Barry comes back in this one, and I believe this is the one where they're on a cruise ship, and there's an outbreak on a cruise ship. I think.
Listen, all I remember is playing Leon, and I'm like, all right, this is two. It's not that good.
I
I
might be
can't really
talking out of
tell.
my ass.
Listen, I played it once, like 20 years ago on the Game Boy Color. I don't, and I remember not being impressed. So, and it's not even that like games like this can't work on the Game Boy technically, because I mean I did play the Metal Gear Solid on Game Boy, which is a remake of the NES game. And that game was fun and it was pretty good. So, action games can work. It's just this it didn't do it for
Yeah,
me.
you have to realize what platform the game is on, and you have to play to its strengths. So
Yeah.
you can't make a RE game. Maybe now you can. Now you probably could. But back then, you couldn't make an RE game for Game Boy or even the DS like you could for the PlayStation or the PlayStation 2. They can't be the same game. So it can work, but these two didn't. They're not horrible. They're not Survivor level, but they're like the diet sodas of the
I'm tempted to
OGs.
put it in D, quite frankly, because I think I'm giving it too much credit by C because they're tied to like the first games. Like a
Maybe.
standalone, I think standalone they're just really terrible games. So I'm changing it. I'm pivoting and I'm putting them in D. Do
Okay, yeah.
any pushback?
No, I don't think they're not Survivor. Survivor's a strong contender so far for a shitty Resident Evil game. I think D just it missed the mark, but it's not unplayable. It's not horrible. It's not egregious. So I
Mm-hmm.
think D is a good like it's inoffensive, but I'm not fucking I'm not dropping 100 grand to get a hard copy of this game unless I'm a diehard
Nah,
Resident Evil
I'm
fan.
good, and I think these are going for a lot because they're hard to find.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
imagine. Yeah.
but no thanks. You can keep it. I will emulate it if worst comes to worst.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so we're hitting the the PS2 GameCube generation. I think it's appropriate to start off with Resident Evil 1 remake, and this goes firmly in S tier
S.
because
Yes. Thank you.
this there's no I don't you're not gonna get any disagreements here. I don't think this
No.
game is fucking fantastic. It's everything that we thought the first one was when we first played it 25 years
Yes.
ago, but it brings it to a more modern playstyle, more graphically modern, acceptable level, and it adds the things that it did add only made it better. Like what's the girl's name? she's like transforming or whatever. I forget her name. Damn.
Lisa Trevor, I
Yes, thank
begin.
you. The Lisa
Yeah.
battle wasn't in the first game, and I think that added a lot to the game. Um, but it kept everything that it needed to, and like things like the defensive weapons, like the grenade that you could, the taser or whatever that you could stuff in the zombie's mouth, and the knife. That was really cool. That added layers to like the
Yep.
inventory system because these weren't items you could just use normally. They were used specifically as defensive tools. I love this game. This game is amazing. I think
Ooh.
I'm gonna I might eat my own words with this one, but like I think Resident Evil 1 remake on the GameCube is the greatest Resident Evil game ever. I think it's at
I
the top.
mean, I might be on that hill with you being crucified, but I have to agree. This was my first experience playing the original Resident Evil back on
Wow.
GameCube. And that's why I didn't know about the OG. When I saw the OG, I'm like, no way, these are the same games. They're light years apart.
Mm-hmm.
Like the remake is so good. Like it, I'm not a graphics whore, but it looked really great.
It still looks good today.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Atmospherically, it was creepy. The mansion was just made creepy. The lighting effects, like the team nailed it. Like you said, the self-defense items, which are still used in current Resident Evil games, started in this game. Well done, right? You had to make a decision. Are you going to take the bite? Are you going to use that grenade now? Or are you going to save it? Like, that was another layer of decision making and micromanagement that you didn't have to worry about in the original. So, great. The Crimson Heads, I believe they were in the original. Correct me if I'm...
No.
Okay. So who had Crimson Heads? Do I burn zombies? Do I even kill them? Because I know after a certain span of time, they're going to get up and turn into super fucking zombies that essentially run and can one-shot me. So that was another decision you had to make.
Yeah.
Not to mention, there were great modes in that game. I loved the forest mode, which, you know, Forrest was a member of the Stars that died, Bravo team that died. You could play a whole game. It's literally the entire playthrough, but he's stalking you throughout the whole game. And he's a Crimson Head, so he can run and swipe at you, but he also has bombs strapped to him. So if you shoot him, he can blow up and you get an instant game over. Like, that was a fun mode. I love that mode. It added an extra layer of challenge that, you know, wasn't in the original game, but it still flowed with the storyline, so it wasn't out of place.
Yeah.
I could gush about this thing. I still have my GameCube copy. I love it. Yeah, this is an S tier. This will always be an S tier as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so like I had it on GameCube. I did buy it later, like in 2008 or something like that, when I was like collecting Generation 6 games. But I sold it like a moron. Yeah, along with like a bunch of other great stuff on PS2 and GameCube. I do regret selling it, but I did. So I had it. I didn't play it until much later on like the PS4 or something.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I never played this one. And oh man, when I did play it, I was like, yo, I was missing out big time with this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is S tier, 100%.
Well, yeah, 100%.
So not an S tier game. Resident Evil 0. I don't think this was a bad game per se. I think there were elements that didn't that not even age well. I think they were just bad design decisions.
Okay.
But as a Resident Evil game, it's not like
It's not
egregiously bad, right?
No.
I would put it. It's not A. I would put it in B behind.
I would
3.
put it. Yeah. I mean, it was great. I mean, not great. It was a good game. I enjoyed it. I saw what they were trying to do. Again, a theme you'll notice with a lot of the Resident Evil games is that some games tried something and it didn't work well, but then they try it again a couple games down the line, and, you know, technology and game design have advanced and it works a lot better. This was kind of the first Resident Evil game that tried to do the duo team, which we'll see again in 5 and 6. But I mean, this was like they tried to put two characters in a game, but still treated it like Resident Evil, like the first Resident Evil game. When I say that, it was clunky.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah, I mean, if you had and I don't even know if you could do this in the GameCube. I think you could, but if you had someone else playing as Billy or Rebecca, it made it less clunky. But when I first played it, it was the AI, and they are not the brightest bulb in the AI bunch. They are no Chat GPT. So my Billy was just like, bro, what are you doing, my guy? I mean, the story was cool because it got to show you what happened to Bravo team. How did Rebecca end up in the situation she ended up in one? Um, so it was cool. You got to see Wesker's betrayal before like Alpha Team did. So as far as like lore, it was fine. I think I think the game would have been fine if Billy wasn't in the game.
Yeah.
We never see him again. So like I don't get it. His early 2000s or not late 90s fucking tattoo angst was too much for me. I'm like, what's going on in your arm? Is that a disease? No, that's just a choice, mom. Okay, cool. I really think the game would have been fine if it was just Rebecca. And this is coming from a guy who can who can like take it or leave it with Rebecca as a character. I get what they were doing. I like the concept, but it was too clunky for me. Yeah. So B is appropriate. It's not bad. It's not great. It's right where it needs to be. Okay.
Yeah, I think my biggest problem with it was the character swapping and like the fact that your items didn't like you had to put your items in the shareable box or whatever, and I'm like, oh my god, like it was just so annoying. It
Yeah.
made the inventory system annoying, whereas in every other Resident Evil game, it was just like it was you just had to be strategic with your items and like what you brought with you, what you didn't. And in this
Yeah.
game, it was just like it felt like a nuisance. Like it was just super annoying. Switching between
Bro,
characters, switching items between characters. It was like fuck.
I remember I used to use the hallway of the mansion you were in as like my item dumping ground because that you would always come back to that room at some
Yeah,
point until you
just
hit
just
like the lab area.
throw it on the fucking
Yes.
floor, and it was just like,
Yeah,
all
because
right.
zombie's not going to steal it, so we're fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just a goofy game. And again, not a bad game. Like it's I think as a Resident Evil game, it does things fine. Like the puzzles were Resident Evil puzzles. The action was Resident Evil action. The monsters, the weird maggot monsters, was like okay, this is different, but it still fits. Um,
Oh man, honestly, my favorite part was the train, and that's before Billy showed up.
yeah, because that felt like just Resident Evil, and then
Yeah,
Billy
and then
shows
this
up, and then it goes off a
fucking
cliff.
Billy, got a name Billy, get out of here.
Yeah, fuck Billy. Anyway, moving on. Resident Evil Code Veronica. I think this game is very competent as a Resident Evil game. It was originally Dreamcast. I think it isn't as good as two,
I'm curious, yeah,
but
because I have, yeah.
I'm gonna put
Oh
it in
man.
B next to RE1. It
Oh,
can either go.
hmm. I don't know. I had some people swear by this game. Like
I
some
think it's
people,
really good. I think it's a really good
yes,
game.
some people are like, this game is fucking triple S tier, and it's like you need to slow your your
Hold
roll
on,
there, man.
it's good. It's very good, but is it RE2 good? I don't know about that. Like the pacing.
No.
Okay, so all right. First of all, Steve Burns is an annoying fucking character, and I hated playing with him. Number one, Steve Burns sucks, and I'm glad he died. Spoiler alert. Too bad he dies. Um, that's number one. Number two, the game's pacing isn't as good as like it feels kind of long. Like Code Veronica kind of drags. I'm not gonna lie
You
to
know
you. Like
what? That's a really good because they shoehorn a whole nother game into it. Because like
yeah,
midway through, Chris shows up. Now that gave me like the one of the best Chris cutscenes to go along in Resident Evil history of him climbing a fucking cliff face with a
yeah,
briefcase in his hand and just like manhandling it. But it's just like all of a sudden it just went from Claire to Chris, and it just shoehorned like Chris and Wesker their rivalry, their combative storyline. And it's just
yeah.
like I thought this was Claire's game. I mean, Chris, cool. I get it. My sister's in trouble. I'm gonna help my sister. and it was nice seeing pre-steroid Chris, but I think that's why it felt longer, because they shoehorned a whole nother game in it.
Yeah, it just dragged. And if
did.
the Chris section was halved, then it would feel like a complete game. But the Chris section was long. And again, I don't mind Chris, but like by the time you get to his section, it felt like you were finishing the game with Claire.
It really did. Yeah.
And so, I mean, some people might hear us say that and go, "Really, you're complaining because you're getting more game?" And it's like, no, not necessarily. It's just the pacing felt off, which it's like, okay, well, I guess, and I think it took away from the game's quality.
I mean, by the time I got back to Claire, I was like, oh yeah, this is technically your game.
Yeah,
I was so used to Chris by now.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I think it was, it's a great game. Like I would put it in. Should you play it? Absolutely. You should definitely play it.
I think it's very disingenuous because a lot of the internet, or some parts of the internet, claim that this is a side game, that this isn't.
No, this was supposed to be originally the third game. So
yeah, I think it's a solid entry. I wouldn't consider it a spin-off. It's not Resident Evil 4, but I guess it's 4 in spirit. I don't consider it a spin-off. I consider it a side, because it starts. Again, this doesn't help Claire's situation, but it starts like the animosity and pure hatred between Chris and Wesker that we see crescendo in 5.
Yep.
So it does that, and again, it's Claire's game supposedly, but I think it's a solid game. I don't have the diehard love that some people do, so yeah, I would have to kind of agree on the B side.
Okay, so mid B. I put it above 3 because it was supposed to be.
That's fair.
It was supposed to be original Resident Evil 3, and I think as a Resident Evil game, like a complete package, even though the pacing is off, I think it is a stronger game than RE3.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so yeah, Code Veronica mid B tier or high B because I put it behind the first one.
Yeah, get ready for that Code Veronica remake because it's coming.
I mean, I ain't mad at it. I wouldn't be mad. I definitely buy that. So, moving on, Resident Evil Dead Aim. I did play this game.
I think where you're hovering, I think that's where it belongs.
That feels right?
Yeah.
Because it's like not Survivor, F tier, but it's a better Survivor.
It's better Survivor.
Even though this guy was like, who the fuck are you? This chick was like, who the fuck is
She's
this?
like fucking Walmart Ada and Walmart Leon.
Yeah, I was like, who are these people? And I remember renting it and like trying it, and I was like, this guy, I mean, it's alright. It's alright. It's not good, but it's passable,
Yeah. I think it deserves a D simply because it's just a more competent Survivor.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Moving on to the next spin-off PS2 games, Outbreak and Outbreak File 2, which I think File 2, I haven't played File 2, but based on what I have seen, I can say that File 2 is probably a lot better. So Outbreak, I'm feeling like this is the standard bearer for C.
Yeah, man. I feel this about this game the same way you feel about 3. It is by far not my favorite Resident Evil, but this game had so much potential. It just came out in the wrong time frame. Yeah. Like when this game came out, online internet play was slowly starting to get into consoles. Right? I remember having my big ass fucking hard drive and my DHL. That's an oldie for those who don't know. My DHL fucking connector on my PS2 to play this game, and I remember thinking, oh wow, a cooperative Resident Evil the game. This is before I became jaded and I don't want to play multiplayer games anymore. I was like, oh man, this is so cool. It's like, and it was. I found it cool when I got older. I liked the premise because this wasn't Leon, this wasn't Chris, this wasn't like the big names of Resident Evil like Jill and them. This was like, what's happening to the citizenry of Raccoon City when shit's hitting the fan. Because let us, this isn't like the Arcalay Mansion where there were a couple people. This is an entire city of people. So how are people who are not Chris and are not Jill and are not Leon and Claire, how are they surviving this shit? Like, what are they seeing? And that's what I really liked about oh my god, the name just fucking flew out of my head. Resident Evil Survivor? That's what it was?
No, Outbreak.
Outbreak, sorry. Ooh, a fake fan. Outbreak. That's what I liked about Outbreak. And the fact that they were all individual scenarios, I found cool. Like the bar scenario, or when you were playing as the Raccoon City Fire Department, and all of a sudden there are liquors in a burning building that you didn't sign up for. Like, I thought the premise was good. It was just, this was during early console internet gameplay, so there was no voice chat. This thing had pre-recorded like lines you can say, and I'll always remember the fucking moron who started off as the cop, who starts as a gun, who would always take the gun because he thinks he could dual wield. And all I can say is like, I need that, and he was like, I can't do that. And I'm like, okay, whatever, keep the gun, I guess, you moron. So a great premise. I would love to see them kind of do a modern version of it.
Oh, I would love to see a remake of this.
Yeah, like now internet play is more solidified. There's voice chat. The things are, gameplay is smoother. Probably not, but a man can dream. But as much as I love the concept of Outbreak File 1 and 2, yeah, I think C is an appropriate spot for them.
Yeah, because I feel like you can go back and play these games as like standalone spin-off titles and be fine with it. Like, oh, this was an interesting idea.
It does have a single player. Yeah, let me just say, it does have a single player. You do play as you're like, everybody else gets turned into AI, and they're competent enough. They don't shoot each other on accident. But and yeah. So like the stories are just micromanaged into different chapters that converge into an ending. Obviously, we all know how RE2 ends, so they get out before the city is nuked, essentially.
Yeah. So yeah, I like Outbreak. It's just, is it better than the B tier stuff? No. So it's automatically in C tier. It is better than the stuff in D tier. So like this is kind of starting to, like, the list is starting to build up to where we have the standard bearers for each like category. And so this is going to be interesting where the chips kind of fall now. So now, next up, with that being said, is Resident Evil 4. Original Resident Evil 4. Now, the real question is, does this belong in A tier or S tier? Because they don't belong nowhere else.
Okay. So, real quick for me, if this was before, I'm going to spoil. So, if this was before the remake, I would put this in S. But because of the remake, I personally put it in A now. And this is not me being like, oh, the new flashy shit is cool. It's just like, man. I'll leave it for when we get to the remake. But because the remake exists, for me personally, OG4 is still the GOAT. It's still a great game. But for me, it has been dethroned to A tier.
So part of me agrees with you, because I did play and finish the 4 remake, and I thought it was a fantastic game. And for a long time before the 4 remake happened, I always said Resident Evil 4, along with 2, was like some of the best. Like, it's in, like, I would move RE1 remake from the conversation, because I think that's like the ultimate tippy top. But then like below that is like, for sure, Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 2 original. But the 4 remake does kind of complicate things. But I think this still holds up really well.
Oh yeah. No, this is still a competent game. You can still play this and have a great time playing it. For sure.
I'm going to agree with you, and I'm going to leave it in high A tier above RE2 remake, only because comparing these two games, I think this is just a much more playable game. Even though RE2 original is still very, 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 very good. Those varies have capital V's, by the way. RE4 is just a easier game to play. I think it offers more. Just because it's on a more advanced console, being Generation 6 consoles, PS2 slash GameCube. And the pacing for this game, I think, is some of the best pacing in any RE game. I think 4 is a masterpiece in many respects. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it in high A. And I know there's going to be some people that's like, how dare you? Like, that's an S tier game. And I agree. Like, I agree with you, but like, it's complicated, man. With everything else that's coming up,
I'm telling. If this was like, if we did this podcast maybe
a year ago,
3 months ago, or a year ago, it'd be an S tier.
It'd be up here for sure, right behind RE1 remake. But yeah, it's been notched down a little down to here. And if worst case scenario, I could put it in low S, like. So like, you know, that's fine. And I might do that later. We'll see. We'll see how the chips fall. So all right. So we're still in like Generation 6 era. So let's do well, I guess we could get this one out the way. I guess we could put the VR Resident Evil 4 right next to it, right?
Oh, I forgot about that. That's a thing, huh?
Because it's the same exact game, just in VR.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to comment. I'm not a fan of VR. I am not the target audience for VR. So I mean, I
didn't play it.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I'd have a hard time putting it on the list because just like it's a VR game, but I know there are other, not solely VR Resident Evils on this tier list. Yeah, I guess because it is essentially the same game. It has the same story beats. It's just from a first-person perspective. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah,
that's fair. It's a bundled deal. Like, it's not a separate entity. I'm just putting it with 4 because it's the same game, but it's just playable in a different way. And while I don't particularly like VR personally, I know there are people who do. And so if you're gonna play a Resident Evil game in VR, this should be one of them. That's kind of my logic.
Yeah, 4 is kind of 4 is a good contender for a VR game.
Yeah, so I'm gonna leave it right there.
Okay, I think that's fair.
So with that being there, let's move on to some other side games. So the Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles, these were on the Wii. They were later ported to the PS3 as downloadable games with PlayStation Move. These are on-rail Resident Evil shooter games that kind of recap the first 3 games. The Umbrella Chronicles, I think, is more so the first game in 0, and then Darkside Chronicles is like part 2 and 3.
I think Umbrella is mostly Resident Evil 0 and 1, I think, and then I know Darkside is 2, 3, and Code Veronica.
Probably.
It's been a while.
Probably.
It's been a bit.
I did play it. I played them once. I was like, cool, whatever. This is House of the Dead, Resident Evil. Sure. Like, I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either. I think it's like C tier.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. My bias in the fact that I'm a huge fan of games like Time Crisis and House of the Dead, those kind of on-rail or like cover-based shooters. So me personally, I would put it like if we had a fun tier list, I put it like an A because I thought it was really fun to play. But stripping that away and kind of looking at the game, yeah, C's fine. It's competent. It's a lot more playable than the early days of Outbreak because it's just a rail shooter. Either you like rail shooters or you don't like rail shooters. But they work. They're kind of like a quick and dirty synopsis of the original 4 Resident Evil games. So yeah, I think they're fine. If you're not a rail shooter fan, you're not gonna like it, and it will be lower on this list for you. But I'm trying to strip away the bias, and as a competent product, Resident Evil product, yeah, I think C's fair.
Okay, so I'm putting it in high C, and I moved Dead Aim past these 2. I think Dead Aim is like a high D.
Yeah, that's a good,
yeah. So yeah, that's kind of where those land. So cool. Moving on to the PS3 360 era, we're up to Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5. I'm gonna put Resident Evil 5 in high C. I think that's where it lives.
Oh, dang, you're a lot more generous than me. I was going to put it in low B. Oh,
low B is more generous. Technically,
I mean,
I threw it down here with the side games because here's my thing, right?
okay.
I First of all, I like RE5 as just a standalone game. It's it's fine. Like I played it a year ago with Esoteric on his stream, and we had a lot of fun playing it and revisiting it. I think this game's a lot of fun if you play it with somebody else. However, playing it alone, not so much because the AI is it can be frustrating, and this suffers the same kind of symptoms as RE3 original, where it's like more action based and like less horror. Even though there are horrific moments in the game, but like it does. I think it's a competent game. It's just not a great Resident Evil game. Is it better than Zero? No, no.
No,
But
like I'm
it's
thinking,
better than these.
I'm ruminating it in my head while you're speaking, and yeah, I after thinking about it, C is where it belongs. Sorry, because I think 5 was the originator in the downfall of Resident Evil.
Yeah, this is definitely where it started to dip. Because I
Yeah,
remember I
because
did buy this at launch in 2009 or whatever it was, and I was hyped, and a lot of people were hyped for this game. 2008, 2009, one of those years. And I bought it. Maybe it was '07. I don't remember. It was one of those years. I
back in
bought
the
it
day.
back in the day. Um, and I beat it in a weekend, and I was like, "What the fuck? Like that's it? I beat it already?"
Yeah, this was
So
when somebody over at Capcom was like, "Action means good, good action. That's what US wants. They want action, explosions, guns." And it's just like you saw it, like the puzzles were. And I'm not saying Resident Evil puzzles needed a master's degree in physics to get, but even 5 puzzles were fucking basic. I mean, some quote unquote puzzles were transport object from point A to point B
the
puzzle.
hardest puzzle in this game was the light puzzle, and that happened once. The puzzle you had to like guide the sunlight or the
Oh,
beam or whatever. That was the hardest puzzle in the game, and that puzzle wasn't even that hard.
so you played it with Esoteric, so you had the option of not an idiot. I played it with AI Sheva, and she was just like, laser beam? Don't mind if I do. So I got game over simply because she would just get clipped by a
Yeah,
fucking beam. And I'm like, oh, this is frustrating. This is frustrating. So,
yeah.
yeah, again, like we said with Zero, 5 tried the co op thing. And as Khan can attest to, if you play it with a human behind Sheva or Chris, it's a completely different experience than if you play it solo. If you play it solo, it is frustrating. Sheva is a sack of potatoes. She steals your ammo constantly. She steals ammo for guns she doesn't even have on her. And I'm like, I got to get through this. You know what? I beat 5 and I never went back to it. It is one of the few Resident Evil games I beat once and I never had a desire for a second playthrough. So, yeah, thinking about it, I was wrong in my initial gut reaction. C is appropriate for it's where it belongs.
Okay, C tier it is for RE5. So next up, this is a side game, Mercenaries for 3DS. I actually really like this game. This is a lot of fun, but as a Resident Evil game, it is an incomplete package. I think it goes right next to the Outbreak games in C.
Yeah. Yeah, again, this was during the early 3DS games. This is one of the early titles for the 3DS. But I'll speak for myself, unlike DOA, which I didn't care for, but it was just like, well, I have this fancy new 3DS. I guess I'm playing DOA for a while. When Mercenaries came out, I had a lot of fun with that. Like I unlocked all the characters, all the weapons. It had, it was when online play again was easier, so I know we would hang out and we would play a couple rounds of Mercenaries between us.
Mm-hmm.
This was great. This made me love Mercenaries, even though this is not the first time Mercenaries appears in the Resident Evil franchise. I really liked Mercenaries because of this game, and I like now because of this game. I like when Mercenaries mode is included in a Resident Evil game. But again, much like my enjoyment of the Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside games, I kind of have to strip away that love of the gameplay and just look at it for what it is. And yeah, I have to agree, it's just Mercenaries mode. There is no storyline. This doesn't fit. This doesn't fit anywhere. There is no canon. It's just a mode that they juiced up. So as much as I love it and I think it's fun, it's definitely a C when we look at the totality of the game.
Agreed. It's a fantastic game though. Highly recommend for 3DS players. This is definitely a fun game to have in your library. 100%.
Yeah, so it's a lot
better than like Deadly Silence and Gaiden. Like this is a handheld Resident Evil game. I think done pretty well. And then speaking of handheld game done really well, Revelations, the first one, which was originally on 3DS, but it was ported to like PS3, PS4, Xbox, and etc. I think this is what Resident Evil 0 kind of should have been. I'm tempted to put it in B tier above 0.
Now I played both the original on the 3DS and when it got eventually ported to PlayStation 3, and I had fun with it. This might sound blasphemous, but I'm not the biggest Jill simp. I'm more of like
I'm a Jill simp, 100%.
Yeah, like Leon is my husbando. Call me whatever you want. I don't care. Leon is number one for me. But I mean, I like Jill. Jill's a great character. I like to see Jill in a different capacity. I didn't like when she was like a BSAA agent. She felt too like James Bondy, like she was trying to be that. So I didn't like her portrayal, but that's more nitpicking on the character and the story. As far as the game goes, I think it was a pretty solid game. It was a competent game. It was obviously, you can tell it was made for the 3DS because everything was small sections and everything was chapter focused. But that's because it was originally on the 3DS and the 3DS ain't no PS3. So to compare that is unfair. But for what they did on the system, it worked well, and they fleshed it out on the PlayStation 3 version by like making it look nicer, adding more modes to it, adding new characters to play as. So that was a nice little bonus to kind of get people to double dip and get the PlayStation 3 version. I think Resident Evil, I think it's a competent game. It's a solid game. It is a Resident Evil game. Yeah, I think B's fine. It is nowhere near A, but it is not as bad as 5. Revelations was still action based, but it kind of fell a little bit backwards into
horror.
OG survival horror. Surprising shocker. So yeah, you know what? B's fine. B's fine where it is.
Yeah. So for my reasoning behind it, you kind of hit a lot of it. Jill's story in this game wasn't particularly amazing. Like I didn't like it for the story per se. The story was just kind of there. I just like the small sections. The pacing felt more like a Resident Evil game. They even had like the blonde chick who like transforms or whatever and starts chasing you. There was like elements of like, are you Nemesis? I was like, okay, this is cool. So it felt like a better RE5 as far as like pacing, but still having the action element there. Small corridors, which had a lot to do with it being on the 3DS. But I think, like as a portable RE game, I think this is the best portable RE game ever. Like I think it's it's the best portable one. It has to be.
I could agree with that.
If you look at everything else, it's like, wow, this looks like a Resident Evil game, and it plays like a Resident Evil game, and it feels like a Resident Evil game. So it's like, okay, this is great, right? And so when you stack it up against like some of the other stuff on a console level, I think it starts to like take a few steps back. I agree with that, but I think it's better than 5. Like, I enjoy it more than 5. I put it above 0 because 0's design decisions as far as like sharing items, I think really hurts the game and the pacing, which is why I put it above it. I don't think it's better than anything above B. These games I think outpace this game.
No, yeah, I would no.
But yeah, that's my reasoning. I just kind of wanted to explain myself.
Okay, no,
It's
I
not
get you.
because just Jill's in the game. I like Jill. Jill's my favorite RE character. But like from a design, perspective, I think it does a lot of things well, especially considering the fact that it was on the freaking 3DS.
Right, and it didn't feel like, oh, okay, yeah, this is definitely a 3DS. Obviously, there were limitations, but the team worked with the limitations of the console, and
Mhm.
yeah, like you said, it felt like a solid Resident Evil game. It didn't feel like some crappy spin-off that was made for the baby handheld console. Yeah,
Right, and
I
they even
agree.
use the touchscreen features really well with the map and stuff, and like
Yep.
scanning the area, whatever, with like the scan item where you could find secret
Oh,
items
I
and
forgot
secret
about
ammo and
that.
stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I think they
yeah.
did a lot of cool things, and so it was kind of like how with like Zombie U on the Wii U, they use like the tablet really well. Like I thought it's like okay, they use the hardware, the features of the hardware really well, and so
Yeah,
I think it deserves some credit for that. So.
agreed, agreed.
Uh, let's just quickly do RE Revelations 2. I think this is a weaker Revelations 1. I think it's better than 5, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of right here with 5.
Okay. I personally think this game is D material
Okay.
compared to the first Revelations. This game is far inferior because your secondary character, whether it was Barry's daughter or the little girl that could detect invisible ghost zombies, they just felt like if they were excluded from the game would have been a better experience. I don't even remember the chick's name. I don't like Barry's daughter. She just felt like a Twitter activist. All in my ear, did you know guns are bad? I don't like guns. Guns hurt people. Guns are bad. And then when she was faced with like, oh shit, me and Claire are gonna die. What did she pick up? A gun. So it's just like I don't like her character arc. I would be happy if we never
Yeah.
see her again. And
I
the
think we're
little
safe.
girl,
I think we're safe
yeah,
on that one.
the little girl, I don't remember her name. It's just like, why are you here? I know she's important to the story, but it's just like, uh, again, this is like kind of the opposite of Resident Evil 5 for me because this I played with Zeta. We played both campaigns together, and the little girl's purpose was completely invalidated because I can literally turn to Zeta and say, "There's a zombie behind that wall," and he can look at my screen and go, "Oh, yeah, there is." So that whole character was just like pointless in co-op. It's just like, so I just didn't like the game at all. It was great to see Claire and Barry again. Barry's like the fucking black sheep of the family next to Rebecca, but I think me personally, it's a D for me. Like, because the rest of these games on this list are, or maybe they're hampered by the time frame that they came out, like um Survivors,
Yeah.
Outbreak. Sorry, Outbreak was just hampered by the time it came out. Mercenaries is a fun game, but it's just a mode. And then, one's a rail shooter, and one was just like the downfall of Resident Evil and leaning too much into action. If I was on an island and you told me I can only play 5 or Revelations 2, I'd say give me 5 because I'd rather play 5. At
Yeah,
least shove
I'm
a
thinking. I'm thinking back. Originally, I started this with like I think it's better than 5, and I think that it does certain things better than 5, but like it is worse co-op technically. It is definitely worse co-op.
Yeah, if I'm gonna
Um,
factor that into its tier list, like Revelations is a better game to play co-op, and 5 is definitely a better game to play co-op. But
yeah,
Revelations 2,
yeah, I could agree with that.
you're playing as a gimped character unless you're Claire or Barry.
Yeah. Hmm. And I and I'm also trying to think like, would I rather play this over Outbreak? Not necessarily. But I could. D I feel is too low because I think this is still like when you take away all of the co-op stuff, like as a like it still plays like a RE game. So it's like,
Sure, yeah, yeah.
but is it better than
I'm
Outbreak? I don't. This is a tough one.
Me personally, no. I think Outbreak again is flawed because of the time it came out. It has so much potential, whereas this one, at this point, co-op gameplay has kind of been established, even outside of the Resident Evil sphere. I'm talking about like general game industry standards at the time this game came out. And again, I don't need every character to be a gun-toting badass, but like the Barry's daughter and the little girl just felt fundamentally useless, even more so if you're playing co-op.
Yeah. All right, I could concede with D tier. I'll put it at the top of D tier. It wasn't.
Yeah,
It wasn't particularly good. Yeah, I kind of, yeah. You know what? Looking at Dead Aim, I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel the same about both of these games. It's like I could play it again, but meh, I have so many better choices.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, top of D tier. I can, yeah, I could concede with that. The reason why I conceded that is because RE6, I think,
God, here we go.
is better than RE Revelations 2, sure, which is a very low bar, but it's like below C tier.
Oh man. RE6 was a dark day for the Resident Evil franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like the Smash Brothers of Resident Evil. It had Leon, it had Chris. It didn't have Jill, but it had Leon and Chris. It had Ada. And it had like new characters that no one gives a shit about because one disappears and the other one dies. It had Sherry. She was big and grown and had guns now. It had Jake.
Not Wesker.
Yeah, we had great value Wesker. It was like, but oh my god, this was the lowest point of the series. It was action beginning to end. Survival horror, get that shit out of here. Horror, get that shit out of here. Michael Bay, get in here and make a video game. It was just explosions and gunfights, and it's just like, what is this? Is this supposed to be Resident Evil? I just got 360 no scoped by a Ganado. Like, what is this? Like, and then like the different HUDs with the phones, just like there was no cohesive style. Like they tried to do some like weird 3D phone HUD system that showed your HP and your ammo counter, and some people had lime green, some people had gray, some people had white. It was like, this is a hot mess.
It was a clusterfuck of a game for sure.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't want to rant too hard, but
yeah, RE6. I mean, yeah, I mean, this game had potential. It had some promise, but I think in execution, it tried to do too much, too fast, and it's like quality or quantity over quality. Like, yes, instead 100%. Of making one really good story, they just made a bunch of stories and like kind of mashed it together. And I was like, here you go. And it's like, I don't know if I like this. So,
yeah, and then they tried to do the whole, whoa, Leon is now mad with Chris, and Ada is pitting them against each other. Some fucking General Hospital romance shit going on here. I'm like, what? Why would Leon hate Chris? Like, why?
I don't know.
And then they had like Neo Umbrella, and then there was like a clone of Ada, and it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
no,
super convoluted. But from a gameplay standpoint, it played a lot like 5.
Yeah. Played like 5 on steroids, in my opinion.
Which I don't think is better. I think low C is kind of where it belongs. D feels a little low because it's still a competent game. Like if it wasn't Resident Evil, I think it would be more acceptable. So I think
I'll agree with that. It was competent. It did have the whole diving system, which I do like, and I would like to see them just cannibalize that and put it into another Resident Evil game, because the fact that you can kind of go from standing to like jumping to the side, jumping backwards, rolling forwards, I thought that was cool, and that was like the only thing that kept me going from the gameplay standpoint. But everything else was just like, what is this fucking garbage?
Yeah, but it wasn't a good game.
It was serviceable, so I will put it low C. Very low C is definitely a fine place to put it.
All right. This is gonna be an easy agreement.
Fucking hell.
F tier, yes. Top of F tier.
Yup. This game was fucking trash. It was fucking bad. Me, Zeta, and another friend played this. Oh my god. You want to talk about bullet sponges? Holy shit. You think Division was bad? No, you ain't seen Division got nothing on fucking Operation Raccoon City. It was just like you played as like umbrella agents and they tried to tie it into two. Like one of the characters was the protege to Hunk, one of my personal favorite Resident Evil characters. I'm like, get this fucking there he goes on the cover. The fucking gas mask plague doctor looking cosplayer out of here. Like the game was bad. Oh my god. They got like they couldn't even be bothered to pay like the good Leon and Claire voice actors. So their voice actors were like, what is this? They tried to tie it into 3 where you had to kind of corral Nemesis because he was getting angsty, and it's just like, get out of here, get out of here. This game was bad. That's it. It's just bad. It's a bad game.
PS3 360 era of Resident Evil was really, really poor. This was a very dark time for RE fans.
Yeah.
We'll just put this in F tier. This wasn't even a Resident Evil game. This was just like
this was Capcom going, oh, can we make a competitive sport out of Resident Evil?
Yeah, it was like, can it be Counter-Strike or fucking Division or some shit? It's like, no. What?
This shit went on sale and I think it's dead. I don't even know if the servers is still up. I'm gonna say no.
Probably not. So let's get that out the way. Let's just clean that off our plate. Okay. So these two I'll leave with the games that they were paired with. RE2 remake, I think either goes S tier behind RE1 remake or top of A tier. This is kind of where this game belongs, in my opinion. What do you think?
Okay. I'm gonna say top of A tier because there's another game that we haven't gotten to yet that is S tier right next to the original because it saved the franchise. I don't care what anybody says.
I agree.
It saved it. So while Resident Evil Remake 2 was a great game, it was like the last game I personally went to a GameStop at. Well, they don't do midnight releases anymore. So 9 p.m. release to get it. It was like the last game I did that for. It was a great game. It expanded on the Resident Evil 2 storyline. It modernized the gameplay. The puzzles were solid. The characters were great. The little pieces when you played as Ada, the little pieces when you played as Sherry were remade and well done. Great game, but it's not S. It's not S. I know a lot of people are gonna be like, yeah, you guys are out of your mind. But when we get to the next game,
I mean, I did say bottom S, high A, right? Like this would list for me, but I can concede high A for sure.
I personally think it's high A. It's a fantastic game. Like if this is where you come into Resident Evil, I wouldn't blame you. And I think it does a fine job of like tapping into the original game without disrespecting it, but modernizing the gameplay and the storyline to make it fit. We're going to use a word I hate, modern audiences, but not in the condescending way, and like the actual, we respect where we came from, but we're going to modernize the game. So right. I high A is great.
Agreed. High A. I'm good with that. Speaking of the game that saved the franchise, RE7. Let's just put that where it belongs. S tier.
S. Yep.
I think the only thing wrong with this game was maybe the pacing near the end kind of fell off a little bit with the boat section. But besides that, I think everything about this game was perfect.
Yeah, I could agree with the boat section. The part where, like, again, it kind of did the same thing, not as egregiously, but it kind of did the same thing as Code Veronica with the Chris section. Like the fact that I'm all of a sudden playing as Mia, it's just like, wait. Wasn't I playing as Ethan? I know where Mia currently is, but I guess they wanted to use it as kind of like an explanation to how things, went to shit. But besides that point, I will agree that was kind of a stumbling block. I think 7's a fantastic game. I know there's like a controversy of first person to third person. I don't mind it being first person. To me, it added more of the horror to my survival horror. and it just brought everything back from the brink. Where 6 was all action and high octane and all gas, no brakes, Resident Evil like just went like hard breakage and was just like slow the game down, make you feel scared. It had those weird noises that you weren't sure, is it a molded or is it just ambiance?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Jack was like a slow nemesis. He didn't have tentacles to grab you. He didn't have rocket launchers. He was just a guy with a shovel. And that's what made him scarier, in my opinion. He didn't have all these crazy bioweapons. It was just some weird country guy
he
with a
did,
shovel.
right? Like, he did have, like, the man shot himself in the head and still survived. So,
Well,
like, he
yeah,
had
true.
powers, but, like, it wasn't as, like, over the top as, like, other large enemies, yeah.
And then when you fought him later, he was a big, bombastic Resident Evil boss. So he wasn't, like, the creeping terror of the beginning of the first half of the game. But so like he fit in, like all the characters fit in so well, except Lucas. I think Lucas was kind of weak.
Yeah.
They sort of kind of redeemed him in the DLC. And then when you played as Chris, it did kind of lean back towards more Resident Evil 5-ish because Chris was just Chris. He would punch molded and kick him like, I'm Chris Redfield, I don't care. So it's like, but it's DLC, and while I will count it, and also the DLC where you play as Jack's brother and he was just punching molded in the face, I was like, okay, this is a little weird, but that's DLC, that's separate content. I'm talking about,
to be fair, they had DLC that like countered that, like the Marguerite DLC,
right? Exactly.
They had like some really good downloadable content that leaned horror, so they had a good balance of action and horror DLC. So I'm okay with it personally.
Okay, you know what? That's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah.
So yeah, RE7 is a masterpiece. Yeah. I think the last 30 or 40% of the game, as far as the story goes, kind of fell off a little bit. It lost its way a little bit, but I could tell you the first half of the game, the Jack Baker Marguerite section of the game, fucking masterful Resident Evil game design. Loved 7. I think 7 is the reason why. I think this was the start of Capcom's rise back to prominence.
Because I after 6, I swore Resident Evil was done. I'm like, we're not going to see another Resident Evil game. It's done.
Yeah, but luckily it's back and it's doing really well currently. So I'm very happy to see that. Although I say that, we did stumble with Resident Evil 3 Remake. I'm gonna put this in a high D.
I want to disagree, but I can't. I just can't.
It breaks my heart. With a tear in my eye. This game has fallen from prominence. The Resident Evil 3 original shits on the remake, in my opinion, from a design standpoint, from a pacing standpoint, from a content standpoint, which is pathetic. This game is a glorified Resident Evil movie.
Damn. Yeah, I can't. Like, I can't play devil's advocate.
And you know what? I enjoyed the game. I tried. Well, let me be careful with my words here. I allowed my love for the original and the fact that I loved 2 remakes so much to kind of like go in this with like blind faith.
Yes,
and I was bitten for it. I was taken for a ride, and when I finished it, I was really conflicted. I was like, it wasn't a bad game from a mechanical standpoint, but the Resident Evil has such a high bar in my personal like game taste that like because it missed the mark by such a large discrepancy that it just I started to hate the game. I was like, this could have been so much more. This could have been so much more, and you guys just fell asleep at the wheel, and you just crashed it. You just ruined it. How I never thought in a million years that I would say Resident Evil 6 is a stronger Resident Evil game than RE3 Remake, but here we are. It's in a way because of the quantity of this game and the lack of content. I mean, Nemesis was reduced down to a large demon dog in a trash bag. Like, they completely neutered the character. It was just, it could have been so much better. I know more modern Resident Evil fans love this game and this is a fantastic game, and I get why. It's because they lack the history of all these,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, but it's just like for me, like this is a personal tier list. This is a tier list between you and me.
Mm-hmm.
This is where that game lands. Like at best, I'd put it up here. Like here.
Even then, oh man,
But that feels like really generous, right?
yeah, yeah. Oh
So
man.
yeah,
Okay, so I don't have like 3 wasn't my personal favorite. I do like OG3, but I it's not my favorite. So I have to kind of like obviously our like affinity for the game is on a different level, but I have to agree with you on the game just being very mediocre. And that's sad coming from like a remake of an OG coming off the back of Remake 2. Because Remake 2 was great. As you could see represented, it was great. But Remake 3, I don't know if it was during the unprecedented times we were currently in that hampered it.
could be.
I think that has something to do with it. I think the fact that they are trying to shoehorn a piece of shit fucking battle pass microtransaction multiplayer game while making this game has a, a real reason. Um, yeah, because I don't even know if that shit is still out. No, that is out. It's the other one that's not out yet. I don't even know. I don't care. Um, like this game, it cut content from a game that was already one of the shortest or shorter Resident Evil games. It got rid of the only other boss in the game, the Worm. Now, was the Worm the groundbreaking boss? And would he rank an S rank of Resident Evil bosses? No, but Resident Evil already didn't have a lot, and you took away the only other boss that wasn't Nemesis. You took out a whole section. You took out the Raccoon City newspaper and the park. You removed sections of the game and the clock tower.
Yep.
Like, how could you remove sections from a game that's already short? Like, that game just was on light speed. And for me personally, Resident Evil 3, it hit that really bad moment when the game became a video game. And I know that sounds weird, so like I'll explain it. For me, when a game becomes too video gamey is when I'm doing stuff for like points. So for those that don't, Resident Evil had like a point system where you could use to unlock guns. And I remember farming the the hospital section with Carlos,
Oh yeah, I
or
did the same.
and farming the before Carlos, I farmed the power station with the little larva creatures because they were easy points. And I used that to buy a better handgun and a shotgun. I should not be doing that in a Resident Evil game, but I was. So for me, that's when it hit the gamey portion, and like all immersion, everything was broken. I was treating this like, okay, I'm gonna farm for this weapon. Okay, cool. I got enough points for the weapon. All right, I want to farm for the infinite ammo assault rifle. Okay, let's farm for it. And I should never want to feel that way in a Resident Evil game, and I did with 3.
Agreed. Um, it was just a poor Resident Evil entry in my opinion. Especially compared to the other modern ones, it was quite the downgrade.
Yeah,
And as far
yeah,
as resistance goes, I didn't put it in F because I think as a standalone, if it wasn't Resident Evil, if it was just a quirky multiplayer game, I think it's fine. Like I played it and I was like, all right, I see potential in this. Um, but this is a Resident Evil tier list, so it is going right next to Resident Evil Gaiden on the Game Boy Color because it's just like,
yeah. To
why is
me,
this a thing?
it's just Capcom catching, like trying to cash in on Dead by Daylight and that gameplay style because it's very, very Dead by Daylight-ish,
Hmm.
where you have survivors, the humans you play as, and they even have like stereotypical archetypes. They have the jock, the pretty girl, the token minority, the Asian who's really smart. Like, what am I in like fucking fucking the 90s? Like, what is this like? And then like oh, let me just materialize Nemesis because I'm the game master and I control it. It's like, no, I'm good. I'm good. You can keep it. And I think this got in the way of Resident Evil 3's development.
I can't disagree with that.
I have no proof. I am no Capcom insider, but I feel this game got in the way of his development.
Most likely. I think this was developed by a different team, and I think it was just paired with RE3 because they knew RE3 was so incomplete. And so pairing it with this was like, all right, well, hey, you're getting 2 games technically. That's my conspiracy theory, but I don't give a shit anymore. Fuck both these games.
Also, Resident Evil 3 is a $50 game. I regret paying $60 for it.
It was a $60 game. It was a full-fledged $60 release, which was insane to me.
Yeah, in my opinion, this is a $50 game.
At hell no.
Best.
This is a $40 easily. Some people joke and it says it's a DLC expansion to RE2 because it was so short it felt like a DLC expansion.
I can't argue with that. It was like, yeah, you're probably right. It probably
and they took out Mercenaries mode. What?
Oh yeah, they took out Mercenaries mode for this garbage for Resistance.
Crazy, insane. Yeah, D tier. Fuck this game. Moving on to Resident Evil 8 Village. I liked this game. I enjoyed it for what it was. Was it 7 level?
No,
Hell no.
No.
Was it even this level? Nah.
Debatable.
I think I put it like mid B tier because it wasn't terrible.
No, it wasn't a bad game. Not at all. Oh man. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine too. Yeah. We don't even need to talk about that one.
We really don't.
Resident Evil 8 was a good game. I enjoyed it. I definitely feel like I got my money's worth. But to me, it started falling back into the Resident Evil 5. It started focusing more on the action. It felt like it felt like it was a bunch of different. It wanted to be a bunch of different games, right? And I think I used this analogy in another conversation on another podcast. But Resident Evil 8 felt like going into a theme park where I can go like, oh, let's visit the big titty vampire lady. Okay, let's go to the fish man. Let's go to the haunted spooky house. Let's go to Robot Man. And it's just like I didn't like it. I didn't like that feeling. It felt like I was visiting places and I wasn't in a world. And I know Kong hates him like right off the bat. I used to be an Ethan defender.
Fuck that character.
Now thinking on it, he wasn't a great character. No. He really wasn't. I get the point. I guess I get the point that the developers were trying to do. The fact that you never saw Ethan, his face was like, oh, you can like juxtaposition yourself. It's like nah. No. Resident Evil has never been about like seeing myself in these characters. It was just like, no, this is Chris. This is how he acts. These are his beliefs. These are Leon's beliefs, Claire's beliefs, Jill's, etc., etc. I never needed to kind of like, oh, what if I was in Resident Evil world? Which kind of adds to the theme park thing because when you go to a theme park, it's your experience at the theme park. So, yeah, I'm kind of like, Ethan's dead. Cool. We never see him again. Cool. So, while 8 was a good game, I'm not going to say great. It was a good game. I think B is appropriate. I didn't even like Chris's representation in the game. And then, again, we had the whole fucking Army of One Rambo Chris section. It's just like, I don't like that Chris has been shoehorned as the meathead of Resident Evil because I think that's doing a disservice to Chris. Chris is like a highly intelligent individual, and the fact that they're trying to make him like, oh, unga bunga, me Chris, me shoot gun, yeah, punch rock. It's just like,
yeah, he's like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of like Resident Evil.
Don't do Chris like that, man. My man's a fighter pilot. Like, fucking meatheads don't fly jets. Come on now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think RE8 did a lot of things really well. Like the first person, they like that design still carried over really well, and I liked the concept that they were trying to get after, like introducing like these lichens or whatever. It's random as fuck, but like those guys were scary, man. Like that first section where you're like trapped and you have to survive. That was
you gotta
that
get
was
the little
that
pea
was an
shooter.
intense
Yeah.
intense section of the game that
But
that gave me Resident Evil vibes for sure.
slightly spoiler alert. I think there's a new game that did that better.
Agreed, but still, RE8 in a vacuum, I think, does Resident Evil things well in certain sections. Like the dollhouse section was very, very intense and scary and puzzle driven, which was nice.
I will give
The
it that the puzzles in 8 were pretty good. I did like them. They
you
were
know what I
good.
mean? Like it did Resident Evil
Yeah.
things well. The Lady D section, Lady Dimitrescu and her castle was very Resident Evil 1. Corridors, locked doors, figure out a different path, kind of Resident Evil trope that I thought they executed well. Heisenberg section I thought was really strong with the robot. I don't want to call them
factory.
zombies, but like the robot factory, the enemies there were really
Yeah.
cool, and they were scary in their own right in a really intimidating way. And the puzzles in that section were really cool with like the melding and stuff. I was like, okay, you're kind of going back and forth and like backtracking.
Yeah, I remember that. Okay.
So
yeah,
like
that
you know,
was
it did things well, and then like even the fish part, like the fishman part. I think his name is Salvatore. Like that boss fight felt like very Resident Evil 4 levels of like it felt like a Resident Evil 4 boss fight. I you know that section was the weakest amongst the four, but like it was still fine for what it was. So I think as a packaged Resident Evil experience, it does a lot of things really well. It's just not super uniform. It felt like an amusement park, like you said.
Yeah.
And Ethan is a very unlikable character and very unrelatable and just kind of bland. I didn't care for him. No deduction points from that. It's just whatever.
I mean, it was just like again, Resident Evil. People will say, "Oh, it's realistic." I'm like, bro, no, it's not.
No, it's
Come
hokey.
on now.
It's a hokey game.
But like,
you know.
it's hokey. But then 8 went like hokey to the max. Like the man like had his hand ripped because they crucified him, and then like he had his hand cut off, and the fact that he poured like fucking holy water on the shit, and it just like mysteriously stuck together. It was just like, bro, you played your.
They did that in 7. So
Yeah, but then like, yeah, you know, you're right. But then like, for me, like they played their plot twist way too early to find out that it's like, oh, the reason he can do that is that Ethan was technically a molded the whole time, so he's been dead since the beginning of Resident Evil 7. I'm like, I guess.
I didn't know that. Like I didn't figure that out until they told me, but I didn't care either. I was just like, okay. Like I had no attachment to Ethan at all.
Yeah,
like,
it didn't make me turn the game off, but it's just like, oh, his hand's cut off, and he just, oh, okay, whatever. All right, here we go. Let's go. And then when they hit you with the plot twist, I'm like, oh, I guess. I guess. Like,
yeah, I just shrugged and I was like, okay, moving on. Anyway, and then the Chris section entered, and I was like, okay, cool. I guess I'm just fucking Call of Duty man now.
Yeah, oh my god, it's just like I have to silence fucking M4 Assault. I'm like, oh god, here we go. Semper Fi, fucking Army of One Chris coming through. It's like,
yeah, which kind of like
do to you, bro?
They that kind of killed it for me because like the difference between the beginning of the game where you're stuck in the village and all you got is that little bullshit handgun and the lichens are fucking you up and these guys are scary, man. They whip up on you and like they hurt. And then to compare that to the end, Chris, where I'm just like mowing these motherfuckers down. I'm like, wow, what a fucking difference.
It's like, I get it. Chris is an OG. He's a trained soldier, but come on, man.
It just didn't do it for me. At that point, I was just like, I'm just ready for the game to be over.
Yeah.
So, again, not a terrible game. I put it above 3 because I think it's a stronger game as a package.
Oh no, it was a complete game. Yes, I agree.
You know, maybe even above Code Veronica.
Yeah, no, that.
It's hard. They kind of occupy the same space. I'll put it above Code Veronica only because it's, you know, a more modern game. Sure, whatever. More people can get into this one, I think. But
well, yeah, definitely, yeah.
But yeah, like RE1, I think is going to stay at the top of B. I think that's only fair. RE2 I think is a great contender for the top of A tier. RE1 remake is a great contender for S.
Yes.
5 is a great. I think it fits perfectly at top of C. And then RE4 remake, which I know you didn't finish yet, but I'm putting it at the bottom of S tier because I think 4 overall is an S tier game, but like 4 remake kind of, like you said before, it kind of dethrones it in that position.
Yeah.
So I'll let you talk about 4 real quick to close
okay, so just to kind of lay it all on the table, Kong graciously, got access to a code of the game. He said, I know you want to play this. I'm like, fuck yeah, thank you very much. So that's how I started playing it. I am only up to the castle section of the game. I recently just finished Ashley's solo escapade with the lantern and the Plagas infected knight armor. So because I'm playing it really slow, like I can one shot this game, and I'm trying not to. So I kind of do like maybe a chapter or two a day, and like stop.
That's how I played it.
Yeah, okay. So that's where I am currently. So I'm up to the castle. I'm kind of like nearing the end of the castle segment, or like midway, 75%, whatever. So from my first kind of like that section of the game, this game is a great remake. This is to Resident Evil 4 what Resident Evil this doesn't make sense. To the remake of 1 is to the original. Like it's a vast improvement. Right? Leon, I think they got right. I like the voice actor for Leon. He sounds like an older Leon Scott Kennedy, not like the bright-eyed bushy tail cop that he was in the remake. So he doesn't have like, oh boy, guys, we're gonna fight zombies. No, he's like, I've seen some shit. War has changed. So I like that. They got like the older Leon correct. The gameplay just feels smooth. I'm playing it on the PlayStation 4, and while it doesn't look the best, because I have it set to performance, it plays well. Like I've never had any issues playing it. I like the fact that they added a stealth section, like a stealth mechanic to the game now. So now Leon can crouch and he can like stealth kill, Ganados. And at first I was like, when I saw like the trailer and you guys talk about, or specifically you, Kong, talk about like how you can like parry stuff with the knife, I'm like, oh, that shit is busted as fuck. What are they doing? Like, what is this, fucking Sekiro but Resident Evil? But after playing it, I'm like, okay, it's powerful, yes, but it is not all powerful. Unless like I know there's probably like a DLC knife or a post game knife that will contradict my statement. But I'm talking about like the knife you start off with. While you can counter chainsaw and you can counter like axes and stuff thrown at you, they balanced it out by having it have a durability meter that, even though you can upgrade it and it extends the durability, doesn't make it broken. So they balanced it out really well. And also they gave you like bullshit knives that you could also use to parry and kill, but you have to make a decision. Do you want to use that for the knife, or do you want to make crossbow bolts out of it? So again, balances itself out by whether you use it as a resource or as its primary form as a weapon. Okay, so Ada, I don't care for her voice actor. She's not.
Oh, dude, she's so bad.
She does not sound. I know there's like real world stuff with her and harassment. That's not cool. I don't condone that. But as far as her portraying Ada, no, she sounds
that was
like
a poor casting choice.
Yeah, she sounds like she came in and fucking phoned that shit in.
You know
And Ada,
you know what it is with her is A, her voice is too deep. B, she doesn't have that like seductive like tone at all. It's just like the one that made me laugh was she just sounds like a transsexual, bro. Like she was like that one scene where Leon like pulls out the knife and like defends himself or whatever. She goes smooth. She said that so deep. I was like, ew. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it was just the opposite of attractive.
I think it was like someone coming in and they were told, okay, so Ada's a femme fatale. She's a sexual woman who uses good looks to kind of accomplish her mission, but she's competent. and like she just didn't understand that and was like, okay, so femme fatale means deeper voice. It's like,
No,
no.
it just didn't work. And like, and there's a bunch of videos on YouTube where like they're comparing the original, and I'm like, wow. Like, did she not look at the source? I'm pretty sure she didn't. Like,
Pretty
look at
sure
the
she did.
source material before like taking the before like getting into the booth and like recording. Like, did
Yeah.
she do it in one take? Like, it was just
I
really
feel like
poor.
the thing is like the Leon's voice actor is not the same one as Remake 2, which again makes sense because it's supposed to be an older Leon. But I thought he did a fine job. Like he still had like the gritty like, yo, good to see you, Ada. It was like he still had like that gritty voice,
Hmm.
and he still had the pretty boy look. So I think Leon was great. And I'm gonna be honest, I think Remake Ashley far
Dude, she
supersedes
was actually
OG.
really charming.
Yeah, she far supersedes OG Ashley.
Yeah.
Like at first, I was memeing like, "Oh my god, they got a TikTok star to fucking be the face of Ash." She's gonna like what fucking? She's gonna fucking do a Vine on me. She's gonna like fucking do some weird TikTok dance. But no, no. Like
Nah, she was super
she looked
charming, dude.
fine. Yeah, and like she's she perfectly encapsulates a character who's like, bro, 1 minute I'm picking up Starbucks and making a TikTok. The next minute I'm kidnapped and now there's some weird religious guy talking about parasites. Like she looks like a perfect character that's in that situation
Yeah.
where she's not, oh God, Leon, I need your help. I can't move without you. But she's like, Leon, that dog's back just opened up. What the fuck is going on? Like that's how I would react if I didn't grow up living through a zombie outbreak. So
Yeah, like her character was very adaptable in
yeah,
in a really realistic way. And near the end, like she was just like, I could be an agent too. Like she was really like motivated and inspired, and that was cool. Like it was a cool dynamic between Leon and Ashley to see them kind of grow, and like for her to become more than just like the mission objective. He did care about her. So like it was
yeah.
really good character building. Ada, not so much. The voice actress didn't
Uh,
do it any favors.
yeah, so I
Um,
haven't seen Krauser, and I don't mind you to like. Is Krauser okay? Because I haven't
no,
seen Krauser.
Krauser's they nailed him. I think Krauser's really
Okay,
really
okay,
good.
whoo! Because I really like Krauser. He was such a cool. He was like fucking Schwarzenegger or fucking Stallone, just in my Resident Evil game. But I
Yeah,
liked it. Okay,
I
food.
would
Okay,
even
cool.
say like I guess spoiler because you haven't played it yet, but I mean it's a remake, so
I
whatever.
kind of
You already
yeah
knew.
yeah.
But like the knife fight between Krauser and Leon is still in the game, but it's not a cutscene with QuickTime events like it used to be. It's like a
Mm.
real time fight with QuickTime events where you have control and you can kind of do other stuff. So like it's
Ooh,
actually
okay.
way better than the original version,
Okay.
in my
I do
opinion.
like the fact that they got rid of the quick time events. I think when 4 came out, it was a weird dark time in game industries where like God of War kind of popularized quick time events, so
Hmm.
everybody was fucking adding them. And it's like, okay, my always complaint of the original was, man, I wish this Krauser fight wasn't all quick time events. Glad to see. Sounds like I got my wish.
You got your wish, 100%.
Okay, I'm looking
Really,
forward to
really
that.
cool. And again, the QuickTime events still exist in this game. Like there are moments where it's like evade, hit circle.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
still exists, but it's not as egregious as it used to be. Like it's not in your face constantly like the original RE4, which is why the remake kind of dethrones the original 4 because the original
Yeah.
4 still has very dated design decisions which worked at the time but haven't aged particularly well. Um, so yeah, I think everything you said is correct. I agree 100%. The knife parry is very strong. It's very easy to do. But again, the knife durability offsets how powerful that really is. And I rarely use the parry, honestly. So like the knife parry is something that it is just another option in Leon's kit. It is not something you have to do. It is not some. I mean, you have to
That's
do it in
correct.
certain sections of the game, but
Okay. Okay.
like the Krauser fight, like if you don't, I mean, you probably can do it without parrying, but like good luck. Um, I'm sure it's possible, but like you can do that fight technically. You could use your guns and stuff in that particular fight if you're quick enough. But like yeah, I think everything in this game is perfect. I can't think of any flaws besides Ada's voice over, which I can get over pretty quickly because she was she's in the game for like 10% worth of
Yeah.
cutscenes. Like she's not
Yeah.
really there. I think the Luis character. I like the original better, but like this guy, he's all right.
Yeah, I only saw him like obviously. I'm trying to get to him, but I did the whole house survive thing,
Mhm.
and yeah, he's fine. Like again, I like OG because he was very, he was very suave. He was very jokey, and I don't want to get into too much of that controversy, but some of his jokes I thought were funny, but are a bad taste nowadays. So I will always like OG Luis, but this one is kind of inoffensive.
Yeah,
And
he's
much like
just he's
Ada,
fine.
he's not around enough for me to get annoyed. Because
Right.
like if Ada was like a if 4 was like 5 where it was co-op and Ada was with me all the time,
Yeah,
I'd be like,
that would be
oh
rough. Yeah, that would be rough.
yeah.
But
So no, I'm loving the 4 remake. I think it definitely like again, same as 2, it takes what the OG did, respects the original, but just updates the gameplay and adds new things and differentiates characters, and just it's overall a better package. Like I would recommend someone play the remake, and if you want to see where it started, play the original, but just start with the remake.
yeah, I would say that too. It's just like the first remake, where like the first one exists, but like, if somebody's getting into RE for the first time, it's like, nah, just play the remake. Like,
Yeah.
there's no need
Yeah.
to go back to that. It's so archaic, and it's basically the same thing but more. It's like just play this, So,
Yeah, 100%.
but yeah, that's our tier list, man. So let's just do a quick recap and let's wrap up and go home. So
Alrighty.
S tier, we got Resident Evil 1 Remake, Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 4 Remake. Perfect S tier. I think that's like the trifecta. Those games are masterpieces.
Yeah,
A
agree.
tier, top of A tier is RE2 Remake, Resident Evil 4, both the VR version and the normal version, because they're basically the same. And then Resident Evil 2 Original. I think this is like maybe not peak Resident Evil, but it's like right there. It's like the only reason these games aren't S tier is because the other three are so good. That's literally the only
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is like a S minus tier almost instead of an A
Yeah, if we
tier.
had like fucking like an anamorph tier where it was a morphing to an S, I would put
This this
original
these
too.
would be up here for sure.
Yeah.
B tier we got Resident Evil 1 Original, Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil Code Veronica, Resident Evil 3 Original, Resident Evil Revelations, and Resident Evil 0. I think these are very competent, very good Resident Evil games. They're not perfect, but they're still very playable, and they still encompass what a Resident Evil game is.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
C tier is topped off with Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles, Resident Evil Mercenaries for 3DS, Resident Evil Outbreak 1 and 2, and Resident Evil 6. These games are still Resident Evil games, but stray away from like the RE formula. But they're still competent games in a vacuum, so that's C tier.
Yeah. And your
And
fun factor would probably put it on higher, but we were trying to eliminate like this is just really fun and kind of look at it for its base components.
right, because I feel like a lot of these like Mercenaries can be higher,
Yeah.
Outbreak can be higher, even Umbrella Side Chronicles and Dark Side Chronicles can be higher because the games are very fun and very competent. But like in comparing it to the franchise history, this is
Yeah.
kind of where it lands in our
Yep.
opinion.
Exactly.
D tier, topped off by Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil Revelations 2, Resident Evil Dead Aim, Resident Evil Deadly Silence on DS, Resident Evil Gaiden on Game Boy Color, and Resident Evil Resistance. These games, I think, are all playable at a very bare minimum level, but stray so far from. They stray even further away from the C tier games. Maybe with the exception of Revelations 2, but like that co-op feature really bogs it down.
Yeah.
These games are like, if you want to play a Resident Evil game to say you've played them, these are the ones you would play. And then there's F tier. These games are the most egregious of the Resident Evil games. They stray the furthest away, and these are the worst mechanically, visually, and from a design perspective. These are the worst of the worst.
Some of these are just bad.
Yeah, Operation Raccoon City, Resident Evil Survivor 1 and 2. Even though 2, there's an asterisk there because I haven't played it, but I'm pretty sure it leans pretty close to the first one, so say what you will about that. Resident Evil Reverse and Umbrella Corpse. Oof, these games are the worst of the worst. Don't play these games if you could avoid it.
Yep.
So that's our tier list. Hope you enjoyed it. This was a longer episode, but you know, these tier list episodes tend to be long. It's hard to keep this within an hour or under an hour. It's just there's just so much to talk about, and yeah, hope you enjoyed it. So if you did, leave a like in the video, leave a comment down below, let us know what you think. Where would you make the changes? Do you think Resident Evil 3 remake should be higher? I doubt it, but you know, throwing
Bring
that out
strong
there.
arguments for that one.
Yeah, seriously. Subscribe. We do podcasts every week, so we publish every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. So subscribe so that you're notified when those go up. We also have different like social media presences. I don't know what would you call it, but we have different social media. So we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we also run the Discord. All those links will be in the description down below. Mr. Esoteric, who's like kind of the lead of the channel, he streams on Twitch on logicalgamers.tv. So check him out. His link will be in the description. Give him a follow. Check him out. He streams 2 to 3 times a week, and he streams a variety of different games. He has streamed Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 8. He streamed, I think he did RE2 as well, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. So definitely check him out if you're interested in, you know, a variety streamer. He streams AAA games, indie games, retro games, party games. He does pretty much everything. So give him a follow. With that being said, thank you guys for thank you, Gunner. It's not guys, it's just one person. Thank you for a great conversation. This was fun, and
agreed.
Yeah, hopefully those listening have enjoyed it as well. So, peace. See you in the next one. Later.
Until next time.